Perfect. All right, we are live here from the hills of North Carolina and St. Louis, Missouri. I'm Sam Robinson. Welcome to the Moat. Today, we're breaking down real businesses, real decisions, and the problems behind them. And I'm Sam Robinson, and we have here today Kyle Harbaugh.
Hey everyone, great to be here. So we're breaking down stories. We're helping you understand what is how do you make your business harder to copy, kill, or take. And but we're not here to just give you information and break down the news. We're here to break open the stories, help you understand the leadership principles behind each story, so that you can make your business harder to copy, kill, or take.
Wonderful. So let's build that moat today, baby.
All right, let's do it. So, Sam, I want to first start off with a question, like I always like to. Um, here's the deal. Um, what's one leadership skill you believe will become more important over the next 5 years?
So this has been a key one for almost as long as time has been around, and which is forever.
Mm,
So I would say that communication is going to be, but how you specifically how you communicate, the words you have are going to have significantly more impact now than they ever have before,
mm.
especially in the next 5 years. It's not only the way in which you're communicating via text, or maybe you're sending an instant message to a team member, maybe you're giving them a phone call, you're dealing with a prospect, or maybe you're dealing with AI now. And I was literally on in a meeting with someone that was like was like, hey, can you just like talk to my employee about like how to use this AI, like how to actually go and build this thing. And the words that were used are incredibly important. And maybe we break that down too, but it was very interesting, to say the least. But communication is going to by far outweigh almost anything that you're doing, especially if you have people.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Communication is very very important. We're going to get into a few different stories here that I think are going to highlight
Hmm.
a few different leadership issues, principles. The other one I'll say is you can be an effective leader, but you may not be a virtuous leader. And so, having character and that matches, a virtuous man, something that's virtuous. So you're an effective leader and you're virtuous. That's going to be very, very important. So leadership that has character, that is virtuous, that is more qualitative than just saying, oh, they're a good leader, a bad leader. Well, they could be a great leader. They could be a very effective leader, but they could also be a terrible person. And
Yeah.
so let's get into our stories here. All right. So over the last year or so, there's been a big spike in churn, in turnover of CEOs in the retail space. So, in about a year or so, a little bit more than a year, we've seen a 116% increase in CEOs leaving. The study was even before Walmart and Lululemon had major leadership changes. Boards are hunting for different skills. They're looking for faster margin improvement, pricing prowess, and deeper tech skills. What are your thoughts around this?
So this is actually really interesting, and it is the difference between effectiveness, and efficiency. And the thing is that being effective and really increasing the total amount of revenue that you have, and there's a limiting belief. So like I think maybe not all of them are necessarily warranted, but I do think there's limiting beliefs that we have today. Like I have limiting beliefs too, And the question is are you aware of them? And leadership, a lot of times, the limiting belief, and you can actually see this, and not just like it's actually more apparent with sports teams. And a lot of businesses need to be run, I believe, more like basically team sports than they do differently. So let's talk about that for a quick second. So there's been a number of changes not only on the CEO side, but you can see that with management. It's like you get a new manager in there, and literally the exact same players that were terrible the year before, all of a sudden are winning like a World Series or a championship or the Super Bowl, and it's like, what the heck happened? Like, how did we go from terrible to like great? And it's like, there's sometimes there's mental shifts of people saying, okay, well, I had this limiting belief, and now I can go and do this. I'll give one that I had personally. This is one that I like struggled with in like transition of having my first child. Of like, I had my own limiting belief. I was like, I thought I like when I first had my first son, that I was like stuck in this chair. I was like, he was feeding. I felt like I couldn't move. I was just gonna disturb the whole process, and he didn't care, but I didn't. I couldn't think. I couldn't think that I could actually move and move around. So I felt like I couldn't do that. So what I would do is, I like over a 3 hour period of, because he was in this threes, I would sit there in the chair for an hour and a half, and I would lose my mobility to be able to do anything. And this happened for months. But now with my second child, I can go and do all sorts of things that I didn't know I could do. And I think it's very much the same way, that there's these limiting beliefs that leaders don't believe that they can use AI to get ahead, or that the timelines that previously took 5 or 6 months, that they couldn't push forward to something that's only 5 weeks, or just a few weeks. And the fact is that other leaders are finding out very quickly that team members that are AI enabled, or previous processes that took a very long time, can't be done in a much shorter time frame, which means that you'd have shorter time to revenue, shorter time, and with potentially even greater stakes in revenue. It also means that there's eroding markets too that they were previously in. We talked about the mid market yesterday, that they need to either move up or down. And so, because it's moving so quickly, the leaders that can't stay ahead or adapt well, that are stuck in the prior ways that worked well, I believe are operating scared. Scared money doesn't make money, and that's the reality. So you can't operate scared. So I believe a lot of this turnover, is mainly because they're stuck in their old ways. And I use my own personal example because I was stuck in my own habits, not realizing that I can go and do something else, and become much more effective and efficient. And plus, for me personally, my child got to see much more of the world. I could walk outside. I could go and do other things that I didn't think I could do. And I think that these leaders are having these limiting beliefs, not only just in business, but also personally, thinking that they can't be better, or maybe they're operating scared, saying, I don't know how to do anything better. I'm near retirement. I shouldn't make any changes. And they're just getting opted out at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think I was thinking along similar lines that leadership can often fall into traps where they assume that the skills that they have found success with previously will continue to pay off, and they can grow and continue to build the business with those skills. And I really don't believe that. The best leaders grow with the company, and the best employees also grow with the company. And so you really need to take a look at how the market has shifted, because everything's going to shift. Everything's going to change. Customers are going to change. The way they buy is going to change. Technology is going to change. Obviously, we're seeing that right now in real time, and leadership has to evolve with it. If they're not evolving, you're gonna get replaced. somebody's going to fill your seat who has a different view on things, has different skills, is more apt to learn and grow and adapt as necessary.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think another way to look at this, I love systems approaches, and this is not something I've mentioned on air before. So we have our 12-part wheel that we have mentioned before, and we use that internally with our businesses. But people don't realize that you can actually flip that and use that with your own customers. For those that don't know, we have a 12-part framework.
Here,
It
I'm going
goes
to
through
show it right
sales.
now. I'm going
Oh,
to show it.
perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So for those that don't know, we have a 12-part framework. This is trademark, so maybe show the trademark next time. But we look at the profitability, sales, technology, product, service, scale, networking, messaging, people, ops, risk, and leadership. And so if I was it's like if I'm a consumer or someone that's going to buy from the business, so externally, it's like, well, how am I interacting with the salespeople? How is technology enabling me to be to purchase these things? Is the product the fit that I actually like? From an external standpoint, not internal with the company. Am I being serviced appropriately? Are they communicating with me? The networking, like, are there, like, for the people that are partnering with your business, are they being treated appropriately, or is it actually beneficial for them? For the scale aspect is one of about the only gray points here, but it's like, is the business too big, or do I prefer a smaller business to interact with? Are the people that I know that work there turning me off from the product and the things that you do? The operations, like the way in which not only your people, but the way in which you do your business and operate, is it against the things that we talked about value yesterday? Risk. It's like, well, are you risking? It's like maybe the product, you didn't look out after me, and now I'm getting sick from it. Like, for instance, we have all this fruit in the Carolinas here, as well as throughout the nation, that has like all these um, 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 like parasites in them, and it's like this outbreak,
Hmm.
so to speak, that everyone's been talking about over here, just on fruit alone. It's like, well, you obviously weren't looking out after me. You could have washed it or done other things better. Maybe there's a new technique that you can use to basically keep me safer, but you didn't care to do that. What are the optics on my leadership, and how I'm interacting and understanding who they are? Or, like, is this cost prohibitive? Like,
Right.
we've seen the erosion of the middle market. Is it something that I actually want to buy, or perceive that I should buy, that's worth the money that I'm spending? So, which is value. So there's all perspective, and we use that internally and externally with the businesses that we have, using like literally over 1,000 different ways in which to view it and work through your business. So for those that don't know, we use a very in-depth approach to help businesses scale faster, sleep better at night. But again, these are real things that are happening. Like, leaders are exiting because they're not adapting to the marketplace. If you had a framework to be able to adapt, it would be so much easier, and be like, okay, well, it goes in this category, so we're going to treat it as that category, as an enablement, so we can make the changes.
Yeah, and I think some of it, like, so on that on the wheel, one of the slices is leadership. And the thing is, if leadership is not doing what it's supposed to do, maybe it's not effective, maybe it's not
Hmm.
virtuous, it's doing something wrong. That affects other areas. So the reason why we like that graphic so much is it really helps visualize how these things interrelate to each other. And a leadership issue can become a people issue. A people issue can translate over to your sales. Sales can translate over to your profitability. Like, all of a sudden, you have several different issues you need to fix because leadership didn't do its job. And so, understanding, having discernment about what you should be focused on, and how your company needs to grow, how the market has shifted. All those are really, really important.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know, just even with that process, we have direct, indirect, complementary, and supplementary issues depending on where you are in the wheel, and basically different approaches that we would take with the business. But like even on the leadership side, I'm like, okay, well, why are they exiting? Well, they're not either not number one not changing, but they're not directly communicating, and which I would consider that as a complementary issue. Of the like the optics aren't great for them because they're not making the change and they're not communicating, which is an aspect of the marketing communication there. Again, it's a cascade. It's like a whole set of issues that if you're not doing the things that are in line there, it's going to really harm you and your business.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So the moat lesson here is adaptability is very, very important here. Boards want leaders who can move fast, make better decisions, modernize, and if you're building your leadership skills, you need to think about what's coming next and what skills you need for that next era, not what you've done in the past. What you've done in the past might be helpful, but you need to apply it to your current context and the future context that's coming. So,
Hmm.
um,
Oh, and as a separate point, one thing to mention is for a leader, there's three things that really truly matter. So for those that are in leadership that are going to be seeing this and watching this right now, there's only three real things that matter. We have the piece that pull the letter, which is in business. But for those that don't know from a leader, there's only three things that matter, and it's also the same way to raise your child. So you can use this in a bunch of different ways. But as a leader, okay, curiosity, okay, curiosity is number one, resiliency is number two, and lastly is being flexible. And the reality is that at one point in time you were flexible both in your thinking and the actions that you're doing. You were resilient to come back. We have the Rocky stories. We have all these other people that are being resilient, saying you got to be tough. Well, the reality is that's only one third of the piece. You've got to be flexible and you've got to be resilient. And then the last, or the first one that I mentioned was curiosity. Curiosity gets you into places that you would have never gone before. And now you're finding out things, even as a leader, that you would have never anticipated was the actual issue that you're able to do. And if you're not able to do those three, especially at a high level in these businesses, it's goodbye. It's reality, especially if you're scaling your business. So you have to stay curious. You have to be resilient to come back and continue to do the things consistently. And really resiliency is just a function of consistency. But and then flexible. You have to be flexible and be dynamic in the things that you're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to be left out for lunch.
yeah, yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's one of the things with curiosity piece that takes time, and you need to build some time in for you to get curious, to have conversations, to explore, to reflect on data, all that sort of a thing. That's a big part of what we do. And I would say curiosity is one of my superpowers. And so, but you got to have time to do it. And I see so many people rushing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and they never take time to look back at what has happened, what went well, what didn't go well, and ask how we could do it better, and have that curiosity. That takes time.
Yeah, and you have to carve it out at the appropriate times,
Correct.
not like middle of the day to be curious when things are going and crisscrossing and moving is not the time to be curious. And maybe time to investigate, depending on the time, but not being curious. That is time really for when things get quiet, that you can say, okay, what's going on here? I don't have the fire of the day right now. Everything's quiet. Let's go and do this, especially from an owner perspective.
Yeah. All right. All right. Very good. Well, I would love to hear from the audience if you are developing a skill that's going to help you in the future. We'd love to hear about it. What are you focused on right now? What are you
Mm.
learning? How are you applying this lesson, or have you thought about this lesson previously? How are you becoming a better leader? So go ahead, share it in the chat. Leave us a comment. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. This is a live show. And so if you have a question, you can ask it right here on our live chat. If you are catching this later on, you can leave us a comment. We read all of our comments. We'll reply to you, or we might actually have an episode where we break down and dive into the issue, the question you have. Also, if you would like to speak with us directly, if you're wrestling with something, we'd love to have you book a call, and we can talk privately about whatever business challenges you're facing, or what opportunities you're considering. So we'd love to talk with you and learn more about you and your business. All right, so Sam, let's get into some really interesting news. This is pretty recent. OpenAI is being sued by Apple. And
This is fresh out the gate. Yeah.
yeah, they filed a lawsuit in federal court. They're alleging that OpenAI has been stealing employees, actively trying to take trade secrets,
Hmm.
and really just do a lot of different things that are going to undercut um, uh, Apple in the marketplace. And so they filed this lawsuit, alleging all this. They're asking the court, sort this out
Hmm.
and make it right. So, what are your thoughts around this?
This is interesting. The first I remember the first time I read it. It was there was a guy on LinkedIn that posted it, Federico Donatone, and he posted like these seven craziest things from the lawsuit. And I took a screenshot and I was like, man, I was like, these are really interesting. Just from the seven craziest facts. So 400 former Apple employees hired. Okay. Chief Hardware Officer Tang Tan hired. That's from the iPhone and Apple Watch. Um, and then that leader, they're claiming, used code names in interviews to extract confidential info from candidates. Recruiters were allegedly told to bring Apple hardware samples to show and tell sessions. Okay. And one engineer kept access to Apple even after leaving. And then two more, OpenAI allegedly circulated a guide teaching new hires how to dodge Apple's exit security checks. And then OpenAI drained Apple's iPhone design group so heavily that they had to rebuild that team.
Wow.
And so those are seven, and I just read seven through, and that was from Federico and his post. Great post, by the way. So if you had hit a like on that one on LinkedIn for him. But I was like, holy moly! Like if someone had the money, like they could go and like try to like for almost any business for the intelligence. You go get your VC money, you go team up with your lawyers, and you go and try to copy that product. And so their question is like, what could Apple have done differently to do that? Because the reality is these ideas, okay. And Steve Jobs, I'm going to use Steve Jobs here, the late Steve Jobs, on this. He said, ideas are cheap, but it's the craftsmanship that's hard,
Mm,
and it's and how you do things.
mm,
So, OpenAI had come up with this chip. Apple saying, "Well, wait, hold on. There were some things here that were ours from the IP protection." And this is something that we talked about in an earlier episode about like, why should I go to IP and have all of my intellectual property and do that when I know China can just take it and they have no repercussions. It's only the United States. So if they don't go in the United States, they just go to the rest of the global market. They can just copy my product. So why should I do that? It doesn't make sense anymore. They've got to change the process on that from a global infrastructure standpoint, which I think that's going to get super messy because of the amount of laws.
Oh yeah.
I'm not a lawyer. Kyle's not a lawyer, but for those that pass the bar exam, I would be very curious to see commentary for those that are interested in this topic. So leave a comment on that if you could.
Yes.
Um, but let's talk about just a couple things about keeping our information safe. The reality is that there's two places that a lot of your information, well, actually really three, but two. So it's either in systems, okay, like actual like data infrastructure systems that you're logging in, et cetera, from a technology enablement standpoint. Okay, there's only two real places. So those systems or your people. And so those systems might be, maybe you're using the Dewey Decimal System and you're still an old antiquated, everything's on a piece of paper, which honestly sometimes keeping those things secret and under lock and key might be the better option nowadays, as crazy as things are getting. But it's either your people or your systems. And so if you can't lock both of those down, and how those things are integrated, essentially the craftsmanship, not necessarily the ideas, not necessarily the code, but if you can figure out a way to lock both of those down the right ways, you're going to be able to win. So if Apple said, okay, we got to make sure that people can't keep their laptops anymore, we're going to we'll have company issued computers, and you have to be over a special IP. You must send all of your stuff back in. If you don't, here's the repercussions that go with it. And not only are you breaking this, you also can go after the businesses that are taking that information, and especially if they have for cause. And that's one way to lock it down for the employees. Rescind access immediately, like basically have a way that they can't even log into the computer anymore, even offline, is another way from a technology and systems aspect. Essentially, it's like if you're gone, you're gone. Like there's no more. Like you've got to be done with it. Especially if you're seeing a trend. So if you see 2, 3, 4 people leave, not 400. Like 400 is crazy talk. That's like that's like saying, well, I didn't catch it after the first one. I'm not going to even bother to catch it, and so we're just going to be lazy. So that's lazy. That's lazy leadership, frankly, and that's also lazy from a systems perspective. That they couldn't even catch this trend even at 100. Nevertheless, 400 people.
Yeah,
Just
like
you know,
like like this. Okay, the lawsuit is. I get it, but like they should have been more proactive about this. It shouldn't have ever got to this point. Um, I
correct.
and I agree that leadership had they did something wrong. I don't know what the issues were, and I can
Proper
hear
control. It
yeah,
comes
and
down
I
to
can hear
proper
people say,
control.
well, like, well, it would have been so much more costly to like, revoke access and all this stuff. Yeah, it would have been costly. You're absolutely right. There would have been, um, you know, all sorts of costs. It would have been less than litigation. I'm almost
Correct.
positive. I'm almost positive that it would have been less than litigation, and these trade secrets walking out the door. So one, I think that whether Apple admits it or not, they had some leadership failures. So there's that one issue. Two, they're alleging that there is a culture within OpenAI of stealing, of like this is a not just a rogue employee problem, that this is something that's encouraged by leadership to like to steal these trade secrets and things like that, which speaks to a deeper issue. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier about virtuous leadership. Here's the thing: I have in some ways, I feel no sympathy for Apple, and here's why. They had a habit of a pattern of stealing intellectual property from other innovators. They, like the Apple Watch, had all sorts of different things that were stolen from other companies, and the whole playbook was, well, by the time we get told by a court to stop, producing this product, we'll be 3 years in production and we'll have made so much money. It doesn't matter. Yeah, the litigation's going to cost us, a couple 100,000, maybe a couple million, but we're going to make so much more money ripping off this technology and selling it. And we can do it because we're Apple. We're the big guys. And so they fostered a culture in their own organization of theft, which is really
Correct.
problematic.
And it's interesting because this is technology is one of those things that where theft has been prevalent no matter who you're looking at. And these there's only really three ways to win. And this actually comes from uh, it was the margin call movie, and there was a quote that said, it's like there's only three ways. It's like you can either cheat. Well, you can either cheat, you can be smarter, or you can be first. So we're going to be first. Is how some of them did it, and they're like, we're not going to cheat. I'm not a proponent of cheating in any way, shape, or form, in any sort of level, and because it always comes back to bite you. And the reality is that it's like you start finding these things out about a brand, and we talked about the thirds approach. There's going to be a third of your customers that are like, I'm not going to stand for this. Goodbye. And then
Hmm.
you've got your fence settlers, and if it's egregious enough, they'll also say goodbye. So now you're looking at half to two-thirds of your customer base. So that's a real issue. And then you've got the people that would have never done business with you at all. So um, those with those three, I prefer to either be first or to out innovate, which is out execute. And there's different levels of that, like ruthless execution, that I've talked to with different owners about what ruthless execution means. Not necessarily a culture of being ruthless, but a culture of being like essentially Lean Six Sigma approach, but a very much like, hey, we got to compress the timelines.
Right. We
Um,
got to make it happen. We got to
Correct.
go.
Like the light is turning yellow. It like move it through, so to speak.
Yep.
So with that, it's like you've called the culture for Apple in this. It's like, and I've seen this not just with technology, but also other companies. It's like, well, the lawsuit's going to be, let's say, $100 million, but we can make a few billion off of this, and they're looking at it as an ROI, like what? Like I can get a return on my investment for being in a lawsuit. It's crazy talk. But
Hmm.
it's happening. I'm seeing it over and over again. These playbooks across different businesses. It's like, and it's not just that. It's like, well, from private equity, we can go and hollow a business out that has a good name, and we'll cut everything, and we're just going to be in free fall, but we'll make all these billions of dollars, and so we'll buy the business for $12 billion, and we'll make $100 billion off it as they're in free fall, and we'll liquidate the assets and move them off to these other things, and so that's one. There's others that I'm like, I'm going to pay for the lawsuit and or union issues, and I'm going to be absolutely egregious, and we're going to go and make these things that we shouldn't have made in the first place.
Yep.
But the thing is that there's a reason why some businesses aren't around anymore. And this is building, and the only real way to build a business that's going to stay in business forever, that can outlast you, and a legacy that's worthwhile building, is to build the things and not cheat,
Yep.
to have that execution, to be first, to continue to innovate, as some would say. So um, don't cheat. You're essentially howling your business out. Like you're asking for things, to go awry and to not go well for you, to ruin a good name. You don't want to
Yep.
ruin a good name. You want to keep your good name. You want to keep it going in the future. You want to have it perpetual. And if you're exiting and you're like, yeah, so what? That's a terrible attitude, because the reality is that you're also ruining your name too, if you decide to stop caring. Why would someone want to do business with you because you stop caring about that business? What if you have to call on those customers again? What if they become, those people go to another business, another type of business at a later point in time? They would potentially buy from you. Could be your biggest account. So
Yep.
like maybe think through that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sacrificing the future for short-term gain. I mean, it's sacrificing a long-standing relationship for something much more near term. It just doesn't make sense. At least in my opinion. I get why maybe why some people do it, but it's not very wise. It's not sustainable, and sooner it'll or later it'll catch up with you.
Hmm.
As they say, what goes around comes around. And I think this is a great example of um, Apple getting reaping what it sowed. And I
And we'll
so
continue to, like, you can see the things that they've released, and the degradation in quality. You really
yeah.
can. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's that. And then we haven't even gotten to the moat issue. There's a few different issues here.
Well,
But
yeah, and I do want to make a quick comment about the product,
mhm,
that you had mentioned. And so the product, for Apple, basically the watch that you talked about.
yeah.
So there is one aspect. It's like ideas are cheap, the craftsmanship is hard. And so I think where they shortcut it on the craftsmanship is it's like, well, we don't know how to build this, we're too lazy to build it, so we're just going to steal it.
Yeah,
Well,
and we're too cheap to pay the license to have it.
well, I don't, I'm not entirely sure that, maybe they should have bought the license. It's like, someone has an idea, why not make your own? Like, the ideas are free. That's the reality. Is
I
like,
hear you. I hear
we
you.
have freedom of speech and freedom of creativity, but but taking what someone else's. So, like, let's say, for instance, someone goes and, well, actually, we're seeing it now. It's like someone, goes and builds and publishes an AI, open AI. Well, maybe they own the intellectual property on, the process, and they say, okay, well, this process is our own. We're going to license it. Okay, great. Maybe I can pay for the license, to try to go and build my own, or I can say, oh, I see your IP. I'm going to go build a different process because I think it should actually be a little bit different. There's some things that I don't necessarily agree with, or and put the elbow grease in and go make your own process. And then now, but I can use the same term because it's a not every single term is licensed, not protected by patent, trademark. So I do think there are things that you can do if you were actually creative, if you actually put in the work, that you could go and build and be proud of, and say, look, we didn't go and steal it. We went and built something different. Like, for instance, Apple was not the first one to have, graphic user interface with the mouse. Xerox was like, but they didn't want it.
Right.
And they didn't see the craftsmanship that you could have behind it. And so, be different, be unique, be weird. You know.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think there is something to be said for having something that is your own and putting your own spin on something. But one of the big things here is a leadership issue, a different one. It's employee retention. Employee retention starts with leaders and good leadership decisions, and it can be a big moat to have people who have a long-standing understanding of how products are developed, how we do it here at Apple or whatever the company might be. And if they leave, they walk out with that institutional knowledge, and that can be a gigantic risk. And I don't think people understand, or often appreciate how big of a risk that can be, until 400 people have walked out the door and you got to go sue OpenAI.
Correct. Correct. It's like, well, maybe if it was four,
Right,
it's like okay, well, I understand people getting a larger salary and stuff like that moving, but at some point in time, you've got to see a trend and understand that there's a trend and figure
right,
out as a leader that you need to either escalate that or work through it and be like, look, our people are leaving for higher salaries over here. I mean, and the reality is that there's been a ton of inflation for people, so it's like, I feel like it's you need to be understanding for someone's like, hey, I'm able to double my salary over here. Like, okay,
right,
well, why wouldn't you do that from an individual standpoint? It's like,
right.
no, I want you to make less money. Like that's
Well,
not treating your people correctly either. So
and I think one, it's a leadership issue, a leadership bobble, if you will, to not have those open conversations and not have, like, oh, you're leaving for a bigger salary. Okay, well, what would it take you to stay? And I get that sometimes it's not about money. It's like, well, I'm here working at Apple and I could leverage my skills over here at OpenAI.
hmm
And that sounds like a more exciting project to me. Okay, well, what would it take for us to keep you? Like, what kind of projects would you need to be on? And
hmm
and maybe you can meet that need, maybe you can't. But
hmm
I know so many times I talk to so many leaders, they never have an exit interview. They never understand why their people are leaving. They don't know all the different motivators that are at play with that person. They don't have the relationship built to ask those questions so that they can understand better. But I mean, a lot of times it's not even the conversation is not even happening, and that's a big risk. That you're leaving so much information on the table that could be valuable for you and your business.
I completely agree. And, I'm going to use a phrase here. It's like, if you're not conducting an exit interview, you're going to be the one exiting. I mean, it's reality, especially, over a period of time, because that means that, usually the people that are conducting the exit interviews are either doing it because they have to, or there's been an issue, um, or that they genuinely care. I prefer to genuinely care. It's like, hey, I want to have a conversation before you go, and we'll wrap up everything and make sure that we leave on good terms.
Right.
That's highly important.
Yeah. 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 I mean, just because they're leaving today doesn't mean that there might be an opportunity to work with you, or you want to at least keep the relationship in good standing because then they feel good about you and they don't have an axe to grind and they don't want to go to a competitor maybe and tell them all your trade secrets. They're like,
It,
yeah,
it, exactly. And it's interesting because like there's certain companies, they'll just blacklist you regardless. They don't care how good it was or what terms you're leaving on. They'll just blacklist you, and that for they won't hire you back. It's like,
right,
oh, we would love to have you back. Oh, you're blacklisted. Well, sorry, we're not gonna do that. It's like, well, what if the terms were actually really good and you're like, okay, well, I moved. It's like,
right,
why would you blacklist someone that had to move?
right.
So I think there's a give and take and a deeper understanding that that people are just not developing those relationships. And if you're not developing relationships and understanding who they are, like I like to take people out to lunch if I can, or have a meal with them if I can.
Yeah, yeah,
That's one of my favorite things to do. Do I do it as often as I'd like? No, but I would say like I do try to do it as best I can, and I think knowing your people is highly important.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. All right, Sam, we're at the section that I love so much. Pull that lever.
Pull the
Let's
lever,
let's
love
pull
it.
the lever. So So there's three main levers in every business. Everything comes back to really three resources you need to be a good steward of: time, money, and people. And so, what do you think that this first story with regard to all these CEOs leaving? What do you think the big issues are there? What do you think is at most risk? Is it the time,
So
money, or people?
if they're CEOs, a lot of times they've got boards, and those boards are very money focused, and because they usually are. So I would say that's a money problem for them and their lens.
I would agree.
But um, in my opinion, if I was to really like dig down deep and based on those conversations, are that what we well conversations I've had, but also and what I've been reading and the commentary from before earlier in this video, it really comes down to a people problem because if they're not adapting as those three things that I mentioned about being flexible, resilient, and curious, that's really comes down to people problems. That's a people problem issue right there, and they're just rotating on. Hey, you didn't hit your numbers, goodbye.
Yeah,
And they're using it as a money issue, and they're quote unquote pulling the money lever. It's like, and then they got their parachute, and then now we've lost even more money. But it's like, well, if they're not going to be, if they're not going to have those three traits and they're not going to work through them, then it probably is better to have someone different. So people problem.
yeah, and I would agree. Like you said, the boards are typically pretty focused on the bottom line, and understandably so, especially if they're a publicly traded company. Like their duty is to their shareholder. There's a very big incentive there, and so also I would say based on just the reasons that were given, that pricing strategy, margin optimization, margin improvement would, obviously I think it is a
Mhm.
they're focused on the money aspect, but it really is a people issue. We need to have better leaders who can make better decisions, who are learning and growing. And so I completely agree with you here. It's a people issue. For
And and
Yeah.
and one other thing here that I really wanted to mention is that if you're a leader right now and you've got to basically show a board, or maybe you're on a board and you're like, hey, we've got some temporarily bad numbers, and you're asking the leader to justify those temporarily bad numbers, or try to like make like short-term gains. Um, Expect your business to do even worse. I really want to emphasize that. Too many times I've seen too many leaders make short-term plays to gain a boost in their either their stock or in their business, to say, hey, we're doing these things to do blah 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 to raise the quote unquote shareholder value. I think that's a line of BS, and I think that's really hurting a business. I've seen too many businesses get hurt on that, and I'm thinking it from a long-term value. Sometimes you've got to spend money to make money, and
Yes.
other times in a business, you need to go and get the things done that are going to take time to
Yes.
build up and ramp to that revenue goal that you have. And to say, hey, we need you to hit this when you're really here, and you need to actually dip down farther to do things that are unpopular to actually get above that.
Right.
And the reality is that things are going to be cyclical. As far as the optics and things that are going on. But the decisions that you make, you cannot continue to make short-term decisions and expect long-term success. It
Yeah.
will not happen. And I've seen too many businesses do that, especially in larger leadership. So I know Kyle knows I've got this is like my bone to pick, that I pick way too often. But it's a thing that I see as like the most failure over long term in a business. It's like you want to create more, you want to make more money and keep more of it. Make the long term plays. The short term stuff is just the noise,
Yeah.
and you got to
Agreed.
keep doing that. And so saying, I'm going to give you 3 months or 6 months to do something that's going to take 18 to 24, maybe even 5 years. Sometimes sometimes longer depending on where you're at, is crazy talk. So anyway, I'll pause
Yep.
there.
No, you're absolutely right, and we talked about this very issue on the show a couple weeks back that Skechers actually took a deal to be bought out by a private equity firm so that they didn't have to be publicly listed on an exchange. So they took themselves off market because they believe in a long term strategy that is going to be bumpy and they're going to dip before they rise, and but they believe in it, and so they decided that they were going to take that deal and move in that direction, and they knew that stockholders or shareholders weren't going to they were going to get killed over it, and so they decided to go with a private equity firm. So there's all sorts of different reasons and to make hard decisions that are good long-term plays, and
Hmm.
sometimes being publicly traded has its own issues. All right, so for Apple, what do you think? Time, money, or people?
Well, this is clearly a people problem. it's
Right.
like the people, they created the culture, and then the people that from the culture they created are creating a separate issue for them entirely. So this really, at the end of the day, is all people. To say that you've got to do X, Y, and Z, and you're losing 400 people. Those people are doing stuff, that they did for the other companies that you took from. I think it's a vicious cycle. I think the cycle is going to continue for them. I think there's unwritten news here, personally,
Yeah.
from things that are happening. That, and yeah, maybe it's part of it's in the little litigation, but not all of it.
Right.
And I think there's some things that have happened as well, and they're using this as either a cover or saying, okay, this is the most egregious thing. We're going to go after them, and we're going to try to scare away anyone else that is doing the same thing right now. But this is the easiest one to go after to scare the rest of them. So there was a Chinese proverb, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like, beat the monkeys to scare the snakes, or something like that, or beat the snakes to scare the monkeys. But it's like I don't want the it's like I have other people that are going to learn their lesson that I don't have to sue as well, but I'm going to make an example out of one so all of them do it. But I would say they need to change both their process and their culture.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a people issue for a couple different reasons. I think they really need to take a hard look internally and say, what do we need to do differently to protect our moat, leadership wise, culture wise, but also, yeah, like they're kind of behind the eight ball to a certain degree. Like the damage is already done, and we'll see if the court sides with them or not. And even if it doesn't, like you're just going to lose a bunch of money in litigation regardless. Like this is going to probably drag on for years. I doubt it will come to a resolution very soon. Um, and I mean, I'm thinking about Sam Altman. Like I'm remembering a interview, and somebody goes, "Well, you're like this AI guy. Like, why should we trust you?" And he goes, "You shouldn't trust me." And I thought that was very interesting. I thought that was very telling. And I appreciate the candor, at least, that he's like, "Well, you shouldn't trust me." But at the same time, that really didn't sit well with me. It I mean, we we should be ethical, and we should be building things in a way that is not oppressing others or taking advantage of others or cheating others. We What's the point of all this? Like what is it if you gain the whole world but you lose your soul? Like what's the point? Like you should be able to go to bed and sleep well and have all the money. There's a way to do that, but you think a little bit more creatively, act a little bit faster, and not cheat. and that really takes, building character.
I think it's not only the character, but it's also the skill of craftsmanship that's
Yeah.
lacking across the many industries. It's like, well, I don't want to be creative, and I don't have a process to be creative, and so I'm just not going to do it. And people think that being creative is like it's like God given, but the reality and just in reading about it, it's basically a skill.
Yeah.
It's like in it with very specific processes and times that you do it, and inevitably the people that were really good at it, even Da Vinci, for instance, like had his own time in which he was doing stuff. And was being creative, and he would only do certain things at certain times or at certain seasons. It's very interesting with these, and there's even more things that are telling. There was a book that so you got like the art of war, but the book The War of Art was very
Yeah.
interesting and telling.
Yeah.
If you haven't read that, it's a good book and worthwhile reading. But it's like there's a strategy and a process and a way in which you do things, and if you can understand that, you can replicate it. But I think it's the craftsmanship that's really missing, and they're just not willing to put the work in. So
I,
it's lazy leadership, lazy processes, which lead to lazy revenue. And lazy risk, which turns basically into the big litigation that you're talking about.
yeah, and I think that's a great point. You got to give yourself time to be creative, just like how you got to be, give yourself time to be curious, and see yourself as creative. For the longest time, I didn't think I was creative. Turns out I'm super creative. I'm actually really, really creative. I had to change my mindset and give myself time. And as you flex that muscle, as you do more creative things, you get better at it and it comes more naturally. And so I think a lot of times the problems that we see are created by people who have not been creative, and that there are solutions out there if you get creative, but you have to take the time and think about it.
Again, self-imposed limitations, like I mentioned earlier in this. So I know we're at time for those. We got people with their lunch breaks ending
Yeah,
here,
that's
which is our
right.
lunch hour. So for those that don't know, we're Chief Go Officers. You can see us at chiefgoofficers.com for more information. Book a time with us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. If you're watching this as a video in the past, feel free to do it. Come on the live show. We're Tuesday through Thursday at the lunch hour right now. And again, we're discussing every week finding real businesses, not a news show, but like real business that we're finding with real numbers and real stakes that are going on. So businesses can't copy, take, or kill you on what you're doing. So until then, keep building that moat, subscribe, like, and share with a friend. Appreciate y'all.
Take care, everyone. Keep building that moat.